Across the globe, freshwater ecosystems mitigate climate change, support economies, and underpin sustainable development for billions of people. However, human development, widespread mismanagement, and a failure to recognize their true value has destroyed many freshwater ecosystems and pushed others to the brink of collapse. 80% of the world's wetlands have already disappeared, and at least 1 in 5 river basins are experiencing dramatic changes in available surface water. A continuation of this trend will see an increase in climate volatility, food insecurity, and greater migration as people flee areas of water scarcity. To ensure their survival and our own, we need to restore our degraded lakes, rivers, wetlands, and aquifers, and protect these essential resources in a way that balances economic, social, and environmental demands, enabling them to serve both people and the planet far into the future. There has been some progress towards the UN's Sustainable Development Goal 6 for clean water and sanitation for all, but there is an urgent need for all countries to do more. If we are to maintain good quality water in sufficient quantity to meet both current and future demands, then we must act now to protect and restore our ecosystems worldwide.
So I welcome you to this webinar on the progress of freshwater ecosystems related to SDG indicator 661. I'm very pleased that we, UNEP, together with UN Water, have this opportunity to organize this webinar and to provide you an update. My name is Joachim Harlin. I head up UNEP's freshwater unit. And we have a role as a custodian agency for this indicator. And let me just say a few words first about the target and the indicator itself. So the target is related to the protection and restoration of water-related ecosystems. And to measure that, we have an indicator which is about monitoring the change in extent of water-related ecosystems over time. Now, a challenge with this targeted indicator was to develop a methodology that was comparable across the globe and that could give accurate data. So through the past couple of years, we have developed a methodology entirely based on Earth observation data, meaning that we're using satellite information with a very high resolution that then can provide us with the change of extent in rivers, in estuaries and mangroves, lakes, artificial water bodies, vegetated wetlands, and aquifers. These are the water-related ecosystems that we have targeted. We're also looking a little bit at the change of extent in water quality. And in that regard, we're looking at trophic state and turbidity, and you will hear more about this methodology and these exciting results in a little moment. So just a few things about the webinar. We urge all participants to put your name and your details and where you're calling in from in the Zoom chat. And we also encourage you to post questions in the chat throughout the webinar. We will keep an eye on them. And when we come to the question and answer session later on, we'll pick up these questions and try to respond to them. And I would particularly like to encourage you to think through how this data can be useful for you. How can it be used in your country to support actions and help create awareness? So how can the data be translated from just the monitoring reporting into actually improving action towards the protection and restoration of water-related ecosystems? So if you could keep that in mind and help us with that kind of input, that would be most valuable. And with those opening words, I now want to hand over to the Vice Chair of UN Water, and she will give us a little bit of a background to the work we're doing on monitoring and reporting on SDG 6. Thank you very much, and welcome again.
Dear colleagues and friends of water, thank you very much for joining this webinar today to discuss progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 6. This webinar is part of a series of webinars taking place this month, each focusing on global progress towards a specific SDG 6 indicator and target. Before we get into the details, I wanted to share a few important messages about overall progress towards SDG 6 and how the UN is working together to report on our progress. We are now 6 years into the SDGs. And for the first time, we have water and sanitation data from almost all the countries in the world. This country data were compiled last year by the UN custodian agencies who joined forces under the UN Water Integrated Monitoring Initiative for SDG 6, or as we fondly call it, IMI SDG 6. The unprecedented level of reporting is a major accomplishment for us as a global community, but even more so for all the country focal points who are joining us in this webinar. On behalf of UN Water, I would like to thank all of you for your extra hard efforts in monitoring SDG 6 in your country this year, especially in the difficult times we've been all living through. When we look at this data, they sadly confirmed the tendency that we first saw in 2018, that we are off track to achieve sustainable water and sanitation for all by 2030. Taking a look at some of the hard facts about SDG 6, we see that billions of people worldwide still live without safe water and sanitation and basic hygiene services. Nearly 10% of the world's population still live in areas with extreme water stress. We know that wastewater is being released untreated into the environment, and 1 in 5 of the world's river basins are changing rapidly, which is exacerbated by changes in climate. We see that sustainable management of water resources remains out of reach for many countries. The data show that in order to meet our goals and targets, we are going to need to accelerate progress, and in some areas up to 4 times faster to be able to meet SDG 6 within the next 9 years. More than anything, we're going to need politicians and policymakers at all levels to be able to set bolder priorities and quickly. But the good news is that we already have a lot of sustainable solutions in place. Last year, UN Water launched the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework with the full backing of the UN family to mobilize action across governments, civil society, and the private sector across the UN to be able to better align our efforts, optimize financing, and enhance capacity and governance. From our work with countries and from their data, we've learned a lot about opportunities for accelerating progress. We've learned about the importance of scaling up capacity building, coordinated action, mobilizing political will. And of course, we've learned how data and information can be used to better guide policy and decision makers in their work. Because despite these heroic monitoring efforts of the last year, we still see large data gaps. Our ambition and hope with this data and with our SDG 6 reports are to further encourage and support national and subnational data collection and ultimately help policy and decision makers to take informed action. This is what IMI SDG 6 will be focusing on as we go forward, and we call on the entire water community from global to local efforts to join us in taking this forward. I wish you a very fruitful and lively webinar today, and very warmly welcome you to join the other indicator webinars that we're organizing this month. Thank you for your attention and for all of your continued efforts to drive progress towards our common goal to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly Ann, and good morning and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar on freshwater ecosystems. Thank you also to Joachim Harlin for your welcome remarks. My name is Stuart Crane, and I work in support of the Freshwater Ecosystems Unit with UN Environment and the technical lead on Sustainable Development Goal Indicator 6.6.1. And I'm going to talk you through the next couple of sessions of the webinar. And before I start, I just wanted to provide some background before we get into the results to help explain the global results. And then I'll go into the big trends that we're finding on freshwater ecosystems, the actions that we need to take at national and subnational levels. And then I'm going to go into a live demonstration of the Freshwater Ecosystem Explorer, which is our data portal for the indicator data. So just taking a moment to reflect on the words of Kelly Ann and the words of Joachim Harlin. SDG indicator 661 is the only indicator under target 6.6, and that target aims to protect and restore our freshwater ecosystems. And the indicator is somewhat unique amongst all of the indicators within the development framework, Agenda 2030, in the sense that it uses satellite-based Earth observations to assess changes in freshwater bodies from space. And we can use a huge time series of data going back a long time to observe freshwater trends. This is an incredibly valuable resource that we have at our disposal, which we basically collected and separated into different freshwater ecosystem types, depending on the availability of the data. So if you can see from this infographic very briefly, what we're able to talk about when we talk of freshwater trends is changes in surface water. So that's changes in our permanent water, our seasonal water, and also our reservoir water, so the water caught in our artificial water bodies. We're able to observe changes in water quality, and specifically two water quality parameters, trophic state and turbidity. And we're also able to observe changes in wetland ecosystems, and two specific types. We separate those that are on the coast, our mangroves, from the wetlands that are inland, our peatlands and our marshes. And last year, we released the first global data sets around these freshwater trends. And just recently, all of that information was compiled into the report you can see on your screen, which is the detailed progress on each of those freshwater ecosystem trend areas. And this report is readily available, and the executive summary is readily available in different languages at sdg6monitoring.org and also on the UNEP water pages. Okay, so that's just a background on the indicator and the fact that there's a very detailed set of analysis provided in the launch of the freshwater report that's on your screen. Without going into lots of detail on this screen, just to say that the process in which we obtain this data, like have this data approved, is a cyclical process. So UNEP, as the custodian agency for Indicator 661, receives this data from different space agencies, but also including the European Commission, who collaborate with the European Space Agency and others. We compile that data and make it meaningful according to those different ecosystem types that I've just outlined. And then we share that data every 3 years with national focal points, with countries, for approval, and only then does that data become official SDG indicator data. And it's with that official reported indicator data that we perform the analysis, the global analysis, which I'm just about to talk about now. But that's the process that we go through to ensure that there is a national buy-in and a national understanding and approval process of this satellite information. Okay, so what are the global trends that we're seeing from this huge volume of satellite data that we have at our disposal? The first major trend, and there are three that I'd like to highlight. The first major trend is that if you look at all of the surface water over a 20-year period, that's all of our permanent water, surface, seasonal water and reservoir water, and you assess that at a river basin scale, and we can map every single river basin in the world, we now know that the last 5 years have seen the most rapid changes in the extent of surface water compared to the last 20 years of data. And that's quite significant. We're seeing 1/5 of the world's river basins in the last 5 years either having a very rapid increase or a very rapid decrease. And if you look on this global map, this actually depicts those river basins and separates those basins that have had a high increase or have had a very high decrease in their availability of surface water in the last 5 years compared to the last 20. So the areas in light blue, that's where you're seeing a high increase in surface water in the last 5 years. And a high increase is above normal. So we actually cater for natural variations in surface water. So you're actually seeing what we would almost term as a very rapid or extreme change compared to that very long baseline. So these are only basins we're seeing that very high change. And these are areas of the world which are corresponding to observations or experiences where your countries are experiencing flooding, where there's an inundation of agricultural land, where there's a rapid increase in the development of artificial reservoirs. So we're able to sort of correlate this rapid increase in surface water with those on the ground experiences here. And similarly, those basins, those river basins that have experienced very rapid decreases, so that's a shrinking of their surface water, also corresponds with areas that we know are also experiencing droughts, where permanent water bodies are being lost, where seasons are changing and seasonal water is also being lost. And of course, climate change is a big factor in this process, and is contributing to the drying up of lakes and reservoirs and wetlands and floodplains. So this is the first major trend that we're observing. And this is a very significant trend. And this is the first time that we've been able to actually observe these global changes at a river basin scale with this level of accuracy. And the resolution of the data is very highly accurate, down to a 30-meter resolution. Now, the second trend that I would like to talk about is this really significant decline in wetland ecosystems. And this is a real ongoing loss of both coastal and inland ecosystems. And we're seeing more than an 80% loss, an estimated loss of wetlands since the pre-industrial era. That's currently, we think we have now between 10 and 12 million square kilometers of wetlands remaining on the surface of the earth. The area that we know is covered by coastal mangrove has declined by about 4% globally since 1996, and maybe much more significantly before that, but we actually don't have records that go back. And of course, wetlands are incredibly important as a freshwater ecosystem. They mitigate climate change, they reduce the impacts of flooding and of droughts, they protect freshwater biodiversity, and of course they store huge amounts of carbon in the soil, and they sequester huge amounts of carbon from the air. So this perpetual loss, this trend, this downward trend, is something that does need to be addressed. That's the second global trend of freshwater ecosystems. The third that I would like you to draw your attention to relates to water quality. And as I mentioned earlier, we're able to see from satellite imagery two aspects of water quality. These are what we call proxy indicators, because they're not actually in situ, they're observed from far away. However, we can get very good recordings, and we can look at turbidity, which is a measure of the water cloudiness. And we can also look at trophic state, which looks at the biological matter within water that often leads to a growth in algae and an event called harmful algal blooms, where you can see the color of the water changing. Now with turbidity, UN Environment have performed an assessment of a sample of all of the world's large lakes. We looked at just 2,300 of the world's large lakes. We looked at the turbidity concentrations in those large lakes just during 2019, and we compared them to a 5-year baseline. And what we found from that assessment is that a quarter of those large lakes have high to extreme turbidity readings just in 2019. And turbidity in and of itself is not necessarily a pollutant, but it's linked to poor water quality. And that's because bacteria and other harmful pollutants can cling to the particles in water, which can then impact human health, and it can impact the lake health itself and the biodiversity within that lake. And of interest is that just at that small sample size of lakes that we took, we overlaid those lakes with population data. And we're able to see that there's 21 million people living in very close proximity to those high to extreme turbid lakes. So there's a very high probability that those 21 million people are accessing those lakes for one reason or another, and therefore a risk to their human health. There's 5 million people included in that number of 21 million, 5 million children included in that number. So there's a very interesting sample size on turbidity. The other water quality parameter is trophic state, and we haven't got such a clear global trend appearing on trophic state, but what we can see is that we look into some of the sort of well-known lakes around the world, very large lakes, you're able to pinpoint very accurately where you have these very high trophic conditions at certain locations on the lake. And the graphic on your screen here just illustrates that we're able to see exactly where quite possibly nitrogen and phosphorus runoff or other biological matter is entering the water and creating highly trophic conditions, which are again very dangerous for the biodiversity within the lake, but of course very dangerous for human health also. So what can we do about these large global trends? Well, there's 3 actions that I would just like to sort of touch on. And of course, I recognize that these are relatively high level, and we've sort of packaged these actions in that sort of high level manner in the sense to sort of reach all countries. The first is we encourage countries to implement and enforce national and river basin policies and laws and best practices that provide effective protection. And there's a strong emphasis on the word on effective protection. There are many protected areas and protected lakes, but the level of enforcement isn't efficient and is not working. So those laws and practices are really necessary to facilitate effective protection and restoration of degraded lakes. And therefore governments are urged to act to develop and implement action plans and roadmaps and investment portfolios, these legislative frameworks and governing mechanisms to identify and protect and restore their country's freshwater ecosystems. And just to say that protection and restoration interventions, they should account for the interdependent hydrological nature of river basins and different water bodies within a river basin. So protection mechanisms are ideally considering entire watersheds and the whole set of hydrological processes that happen within that river basin area. Okay, so that's the first area of action. The second area of action is to increase the uptake of freshwater data into sectoral processes that are dependent on water. And that is to say, what we're trying to do here, and I'm going to talk a bit more about this in the live demonstration that I'm going to give, is that we need to promote and to share and to disseminate available data across sectors and institutions and companies and firms that are dependent on fresh water. And the SDG 661 national focal points and the SDG 6 focal points in countries are very well positioned to promote planning across sectors and process data and trends, particularly at the river basin level, using data from the Freshwater Ecosystem Explorer, which, as I say, I'll show in a minute. And cross-sector planning is in line with the framework on IWRM, that's Integrated Water Resource Management, and its implementation supports the achievement of this area. So this is the second area I'd really like to promote and to push, which is the uptake of information. And then finally, the third sort of acceleration action that I wish to sort of convey here is really a little ubiquitous, but nonetheless it binds those previous two actions, which is really around improving coordination across institutions working on freshwater security for the achievement of SDG 6, and recognizing the central role of healthy ecosystems in achieving water security. And by water security, we mean the sustained provision of adequate quantity and adequate quality of water to facilitate sustainable development, to enable societies to develop and to enable healthy ecosystems to flourish. So this coordination across institutions is really central to allow those first two mechanisms, first two acceleration actions to come into practice. Okay, those are the three areas that, the three high-level messages that I would like to convey. Now, what I would like to do is I'd like to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes and give you a live demonstration of the Freshwater Ecosystems Explorer. I'm just going to stop sharing my current screen. I'm going to share my other screen here. Okay. I'm going to give this demonstration. I hope the technology is in favor of me today. As I go through the demonstration, I'm going to be conveying quite a lot of information. If you have questions on anything that I'm saying, please just post those questions straight into the chat. And then straight after this demonstration, we're going to go to the Q&A session, and I'll try to address as many questions that you've raised in the chat. And if there's time, we can come back and continue with the demonstration, but let's see how we go on. So the first thing to say is that the Freshwater Ecosystems Explorer that you're seeing here is a free and open access geospatial data portal. It's available to everybody. The URL is sdg661.app. That's the indicator name. Now, there's lots of functionalities on this site. I'm just going to take you straight through where you can visualize and understand the statistics that I'm talking about in my second acceleration action around the uptake of freshwater data. So I'm going to take you to this large white button here. Just above it, you can see another which says analysis and stories. That's where you'll find access to the full report, a whole range of different case studies to illustrate how that data translates to impacts on the ground and what can be done about it. So there's a whole area of the site, including map stories to take you, interactive map stories to take you through the sort of data into on the ground impacts. Should you wish to go there, but I don't think we have time on this particular webinar. I'm going to click on the setting button, which says explore your freshwater ecosystem. There might be a slight delay in what you're seeing. Okay, because this is available to everybody in the world, we start this process with a global map. For no particular reason, I'm just going to select any country, and essentially with one click on a country, and I've selected Brazil, that country that I've selected will appear in front of me. At the same time, a statistical dashboard will appear on the left side of my screen. Now you can see that Brazil here is highlighted with a bright white line going around the outside of the country. That's the administrative boundary of the country. And within the statistical dashboard on the left, all of these statistics currently relate to the whole country. So these are national level statistics for Brazil. And these statistics that we've got here are trends. They're national summary statistics, and they see long-term trends. And the way in which the freshwater data is separated is into different ecosystem types. So we have information on lakes and rivers, on reservoirs, on mangroves, if they exist in your country, in the countries on the coast, on wetlands, and on water quality. And that information can be separated further. So for example, under the lakes and reservoirs data, we have data that we call permanent water. This is water which is there all year round. So just think of a lake that you know is always there. We refer to that as permanent water. It's there for 12 months of the year. And we can actually separate that out from what we call seasonal water, which is observations of water for less than 12 months of the year. So if you look at these two statistics for Brazil, we can see that in the last 20 years, Brazil has had a very marginal decrease in its permanent water. It's lost 1.5% of its permanent water. That means it's a loss. This is a downward facing arrow. You can see that I look at the arrow since the year 2000. And we turn that percentage loss also into a square kilometer figure. So that's small percentage for a very large country like Brazil is equivalent to 940 square kilometers of permanent water that's been lost since the year 2000. Now, interestingly, although permanent water is on the decline, seasonal water increased by almost 10% in Brazil. So that's a trend. That's a long-term statistical trend that we're observing in Brazil. For those countries that have artificial water bodies and reservoirs, we also have separated that information out. The critical statistical trend to observe is the minimum water extent. Every single month, the satellites record the minimum level of every single reservoir in the country, and then we take that average over the year. And again, over a long period of time, we're seeing that there's a very negligible trend. Mangrove loss in Brazil is at 3.2%. That seems like a small figure, 3.2%, but again, for such a large country, that's equivalent to, well, almost 11,000 square kilometers of mangrove that has been lost since the year 2000. So it's a long-term trend that's quite significant. Now, the wetlands data, we don't have trends, we don't have a change. It's brand new data set, and what we're able to see there is actually only the baseline. So we're only able to see that Brazil has 21,000 square kilometers of inland wetlands. The wetlands are separated out between mangroves and inland wetlands. And then on the water quality parameters, again, we've got two. We've got turbidity and trophic state. And the way we present the summary information here is to try to identify how many lakes what we call affected. So those are lakes which have had very high to extreme recordings of one of those parameters. So you can see quite clearly in Brazil, out of the 132 large lakes that Brazil has, 23 of them have been affected. And it's the last year, we look at 2019, with the high trophic state conditions and, high turbidity conditions and none with trophic state. Okay, so that's kind of the summary picture, and it's these statistics that get reported. These are the statistics that we share with countries every 3 years. Countries that we go through an approval process. Once countries have approved those data, they get reported to the UN Statistical Division. But of course, with water and freshwater ecosystems, looking at things in this national picture is not always adequate to drive decision making. And so what we provide here is layers of different data. So this is just the summary statistics. Should I want to delve a little bit deeper into what's happening in Brazil, I can click onto this map icon under permanent water dynamics. And once I click onto that map icon, I can start to visualize changes. Of course, we're very high up in space right now, but if I am to zoom down, because this, if you recall, this data is at a 30-meter resolution, and I'm just in northern Brazil here, you can start to see, I'm just zooming in, you can start to see that the colors are appearing on the screen. Now, what this data is effectively showing you at a very high resolution is different transitions between states of water, and those transitions are color-coded. So where permanent water is being lost entirely, that means it is no longer there at all. Repeated observations mean I'm not picking up any more permanent water. We qualify that as lost. That's showing up as yellow. Conversely, where we might have new seasonal water, new permanent water, that's a dark color. We have new seasonal water, that's a light blue. So we're able to see how water is actually moving between these states of being permanent or seasonal, being lost or being new. And we can assess that at a very, very high granularity. So that really encourages the users of the site to zoom into areas that they're familiar with in the country and observe those changes, but visually, to actually see those changes more visually. And this map function, sorry, I've just zoomed out a little too far. Let me just come back in. This map function that I've just showed you for permanent water, we have the same map for every single data set. So if I wanted to show you the map on mangroves, for example, I just click on this map icon for mangroves. I'm going to obviously need to zoom into the coastline of Brazil. That's where mangroves are. And I'm just going to, it's a little bit clunky this morning. If I zoom in quite closely, again, it's sort of very high resolution data. You're actually able to see specifically in red, those areas of mangrove that have been lost. If you can see the bright green, that's where you've got new mangrove growth. And this orange color is where you just have continual mangroves. So again, you're able to use this information. You can see the long-term trend, which is loss, but you can zoom right into the area that you're interested in and actually identify exactly where that loss is, or indeed where there's growth. So as I say, this map functionality to help you visualize those statistics is available for each and every one of these data sets. I'm just going to turn the mangroves off very quickly, and I won't zoom in this instance, but if I click on the turbidity state map, I can start to see those lakes, and you can see them in high orange color where they're experiencing very high levels of turbidity, that's cloudiness in water. And again, for a user, I can very quickly see my lakes in Brazil where I need to focus my attention, because those lakes have been highly affected with turbidity during 2019. Okay, now I'm just going to speak for a couple more minutes and then we're going to open up for a Q&A session. The last sort of two functionalities that I want to show you. So I showed you that there's summary statistics. I showed you that you can visualize those statistics and you can zoom in. But there's two other very useful functionalities. One is that you can see that Brazil, inside the boundary of Brazil, is separated by river basins. Now we do this by default because decisions on water are often made at the river basin scale. So if I click on one particular river basin, I'm just going to click on this basin here, which borders with Peru. What happens is the statistical dashboard gets updated with data only for that basin that I have clicked on. So in this basin, which happens to have a specific number, and we give it a number so you can find that reference, it happens to also border with Peru. Because it's a transboundary basin, a secondary statistical dashboard appears on the screen, giving you the information for the proportion of data that's in Peru, which is very helpful when you're dealing with transboundary discussions around water. And you can change the size of the basin in your country by selecting this drop-down icon here. At the moment, the country is delineated in what we call hydrobasin level 6. If I wanted to have a bigger basin, I can click on 4, and immediately you can see bigger basins appear. If I didn't want to go by basin and I wanted to go by administrative area, we have 2 administrative levels, and these are often regions or sort of counties or districts. And again, this is all just to encourage different types of decision making to occur. And were I to click onto any one of these, the statistical dashboard simply gets updated with information only relevant to the boundary area that I've selected. Then the last function I would like to show you, so I'm going to click out of Brazil and just go into neighboring Colombia just to give me a countrywide picture again, is that at the moment we've been talking about just those long-term statistical trends. But what if you wanted to get into more detailed set of analysis? Well, you can. Every single data set here has what we call advanced analysis. So if I click on the advanced analysis for permanent water, and I'm currently in Colombia now, I can actually access data going right back to 1984, and I can see year by year changes in my permanent water, my seasonal water. I can access charts that show the proportion of water in my country that's changing between those different states, the same with seasonal water. I can start to see when in the year, the periods in the year that my seasonal water is changing the most. So I can really delve down into all of these different data sets. Similarly, if I were to click on the advanced analysis for trophic turbidity, I can actually start to get turbidity time series. And this is month by month water quality data across the last 3-year periods. Now, all of this data gets updated annually, and all of it's downloadable. So anything that I've showed you so far is downloadable. So all of these charts, if I clicked on any of these charts, I can access them. If I wanted to download any of the statistical files behind all of this information, that's also available. I simply go back to the home screen and I go to this downloads function here, and I can find my country and I can access shape files or the entire statistical database of all of the information that I provided. Okay, I've covered quite a lot in a very, very short period of time. What I would like to do now is just to hand over to Gavin, my colleague, to see if there's any questions that have been raised in the chat, so we can address some of those questions. Gavin, over to you, please.
Thank you, Stuart. It was very interesting. Great to see the detail at which you can get down and get the information. We haven't had a lot of activity on chat so far. We have had one question from Daval Pandaya, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, and that is, can filtered rainwater supply to groundwater tables help in improving quality and quantity of fresh water in grounds? As we humans are pulling 4 trillion CBM each year from groundwater, or from groundwater only. So does filtered rainwater improve the quality and quantity of fresh water?
Well, yes, thank you very much for the question. And the simple answer is yes. And particularly wetland ecosystems perform this sort of provisioning service where they're able to retain water, which supports urban areas in particular, or protection of agricultural land. They're also able to provide a water purification service where they slow down water and help to retain nutrients and trap sediment, and therefore that water purification service absolutely can assist in providing cleaner water entering to aquifer systems. In fact, one of the sort of best nature-based solutions that can be applied, particularly around urban areas, as I say, agricultural land where you might need to protect that land from flooding, is to reinstate wetland ecosystems. They provide an incredibly powerful function in that regard, where you can slow down stormwater and runoff and excess runoff, and the loss of nutrients and the loss of topsoil. Wetland ecosystems in particular can support that function. Yes, it's a good question. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Stuart. I've just had another question come in, which is a little bit specific, but perhaps we can generalize it slightly. I'm not sure who it's from, but our Institute for the Complex Use of Water Resource is currently specifying the methodology for assessing the area occupied by water-related ecosystems in Belarus. We have seen the report and we have several questions about water surface area in Belarus. Could I find the coordinator for Belarus? And perhaps to make that more general, how do non-government actors get in touch with their coordinator or person within their country if they have further questions?
That's a really good question, and I'm really pleased you've raised this, because we so often speak directly to government officials, but non-government actors play such a important role. So the way in which the integrated monitoring initiative has tried to sort of support the coordination in countries is to have indicator specific focal points. So we have a range of indicator 661 focal points, and we've spent time, UNEP as a custodian agency has spent time identifying those, and that's who we share data with. We also have what's called an SDG 6 overall focal point, and that individual or individuals helps that coordination function across all of those indicator focal points. And we don't have those focal points in place for all countries in the world, but we have them for most. I can't say off the top of my head if we have Belarus. But what we do have is the database. So that information is available actually on the UN Water website. You can actually access your SDG 6 focal point, and you can see who is your indicator focal point. Now, if you can't readily get to that, by all means, I can assist you in identifying who the 661 and overall focal point for Belarus is. At the end of this presentation, you're going to see my email address, and please feel free to email me directly, and I can join those dots for you. I'd be happy to do so. And then, you know, again, if you the questions relating to surface extent of surface water, and you've explored this information fully within the data portal. If you have any questions on the data portal, on the data within the portal, please raise those questions with me, and I'd be very happy to answer them for you. Thanks.
Yeah, getting quite a few questions coming in now. So another one to keep you on your toes, Stuart, from Nevin Trent. Just checking if I understand correctly, all data are integrated data and trends on the country level, no particular rivers, regions, or water bodies.
Good question, thank you. It's incredibly hard to delineate water bodies that are continually changing. And so the way that we try to map the water is we contain it within a spatial area. So that's why we're focusing on river basins, and that's our sort of our geographical spatial area, if you like, and we try to change the size of those river basins to allow decision makers to see different ecosystem types within that river basin. We found that that's the most sort of practical way of being able to see changes, and the only other thing to add to that is that static water bodies, or more static water bodies, I should say, like lakes, we can. So we do have that lake-specific data set, and you can actually use the 661 data portal, the Freshwater Ecosystem Explorer, to select lake-specific data. And I didn't show you that functionality, but if you go down to the part of the portal where you're seeing your lake water quality, there's an extra map layer that you can apply there. You click on that, it will give you the names of every single large lake we've got. You simply click on a lake, and the data is relevant only for that lake. So you can get lake-specific data, but you can't get river-specific data at the moment. We do everything by that sort of geographic spatial area of river basins.
Thanks, Stuart. That's an excellent answer, good and comprehensive. Just the last question that we see, which is showing some good timing, from Vico Eva. Can this data be freely used, e.g. in commercial endeavours with suitable attributions, of course? So
the data is freely available. What purposes that serves ideally is for driving decision making that protects and restores freshwater ecosystems. If there's adequate attribution to the source of the information, as long as it's accurately represented. Have we got any more questions? I can just keeping track of the time right now.
Yep. We've just got one quick follow-up from Nevin about the basin size. What is the cutoff for your basin size? And I suppose this is to do with your different basin levels that you showed us earlier.
Yeah, so the way that the basin map works, it's called hydrobasins. And essentially it uses elevation to determine the actual natural accurate size of the river basin. And then the smaller parts, the sub-basin parts, have basically been sort of cut out over time, over a very strenuous process of actually delineating those sub-basin areas. So there's, I think it depends on your country, but it tends to be sort of at a level 4 or a level 5 is where you're finding what we would call your naturally elevated river basin scale. And you can, as I showed you from that drop down, if that's not suitable, you can actually select a higher basin level. And that's really it's really helpful to be able to do that because, you know, very large basins themselves have so much complex interaction. And you very often need to select a smaller basin area or a smaller sub-basin area to see changes in a bit more detail.
Excellent, Stuart. And one final question, or we'll put two together, even though they're not superbly related, but one is a nice finish. How regularly do you update the data on the system? And then sort of as a final question, will we receive the presentations and where is the recording available?
Super, both nice questions, thank you. Yes, so this is just to say that first one is ever so important. This is not a static data site. This is a dynamic data site. The data is updated annually to cover essentially the full year that it's just been updated for. So once a year we update it. We're actually just about to update all of the surface water data in the next few weeks. And so you'll see the statistics change. Because I think essentially we've got a whole new year which influences all of those long-term trends. Water quality again will be updated this year, and as will the wetlands data. We're trying to plan for roughly May every year. This kind of first iteration has been a little slower, but essentially yes, it's annual. And that's really, really important to know that it's not a static site. So what you're seeing here is really the most up-to-date information that we're able to obtain from satellites, and it will continually be updated. It's an operational product, and the providers of the data have agreed to always provide it over a long-term basis for us. So the provision of the data, at least until 2030, will always be updated on the site. So it's important to know that you have what you're seeing is the most up-to-date thing that we have available to us at the moment. Yes, of course. The second question. This is being recorded, and I would encourage everybody, if you've not done so, if you either leave your email address in the chat at the end of this Zoom meeting. You'll actually get also a little prompt to also ask you to fill in your name, your email address, and your institution. And if you can do that, that really assists us in being able to share this presentation. And I'd like to be able to send this this presentation and the recording out to all of you that have attended today. Thanks. Okay, then. Thank you so much for those great questions. Thank you for listening to me and to staying engaged. And I hope it's been useful. I hope you've been able to see that this is a resource that's quite powerful. And I hope you can take it away and use it to really support the freshwater ecosystems of our world. Okay, now I'm gonna end here, and I'm now gonna hand over to my colleague Liz, who I'm going to ask to please provide some closing remarks. Liz, thank you very much. It's over to you.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for inviting me to give some closing remarks to this fantastic webinar. My name is Liz. I work in the Ecosystems Division of UNEP, currently in the area of water for climate adaptation, but I've also been extremely closely involved on the freshwater side over the past years, working with our colleagues Stuart and Gavin and Joachim on this SDG indicator 661. And so it's really exciting to see the progress that's been made in tracking this indicator. For a long time, we've really known through the Living Planet Index and other reports that although freshwater bodies cover such a relatively small portion of our Earth's surface, they are uniquely vital in terms of their biodiversity and the services they provide to us as humans on this Earth, all of which have been mentioned in a very good detail here: drinking water, water for food, water purification, flood and drought protection, protection from storm surges, such as mangroves provide at the coasts, even carbon sequestration and storage, which Stuart noted is so important in wetlands and peatlands. So we know that freshwater ecosystems have an outsized importance, but we've also known that because they're so important for every aspect of our lives and livelihoods, that they are uniquely under threat. And I think that Stuart's fantastic presentation really outlined very clearly, with the use of these amazing global data sets that we have in the Freshwater Ecosystems Explorer, those changes that freshwater ecosystems have been undergoing all over the world over at least the past 20 years. It is now absolutely time for us to move from data and information to action. Stuart talked about how powerful freshwater ecosystems are as nature-based solutions. And a few months ago, we launched a new Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which is really a huge global movement that aims to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide from now until 2030. And freshwater ecosystems form an incredibly important part of this decade. Crucially, so do other ecosystems like forests and mountains, which are crucial for ensuring the health and availability of quality of our freshwater, and which themselves also depend on adequate supplies of water for their own health. So there's really a growing worldwide recognition of the interconnectivity of all of these ecosystems, the threats that they face, but also the power and the ability that we have to protect and restore them. Because one thing that we also are seeing all over the world is that power and ability that nature has to bounce back if we let it. And as we move into the next 6 to 9 months, it's a crucial time for us as a global community. We have a number of global conferences coming up over the next 9 months, the Climate Change COP in a few weeks, the Biodiversity COP, and the Desertification COP, both happening in spring of 2022. These are all essential opportunities for countries to come together to reconfirm their global commitments, raise their ambitions to protect the planet, take action to mitigate and rapidly increase our work to help humans adapt to the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss. And here too, freshwater ecosystems have an outsized role to play to help us reduce the impacts from flooding and droughts, protect freshwater biodiversity, store and sequester carbon. And we really hope that our efforts to help you track the changes to freshwater ecosystems here in SDG Indicator 661 will help all of you to identify those challenges and hotspots in order for you to take action to really protect and restore these crucial ecosystems. We look forward to continuing to support you with information and access to tools to help you take this action. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we close the session. Thank you.